Hello, I'm Dr. Terry James Gingras, and this is Dr. G's ADHD Chat. And this is a show designed to make the world safe for ADHDers. I am a clinical psychologist and neuropsychologist. I'm also the father of a couple of ADHD kids, and I'm married into a whole family full of ADHD. Um, I guess I must like excitement. Okay, and today, last time we talked about ADHD and what you kind of need to be looking at getting ready for the school year. I know we're a little late. You've already started, but the and there are a lot of things and a lot of routines that you need to establish. Routines are good because routines turn into habits. Habits mean you sure don't have to use any memory, and so the neurologic conditions that ADHDers have don't get in the way. The big deal usually with ADHDers in school is when they come back home after a full day. Now, I know a day of school is not the way most schools are set up, is not the way ADHDers are designed. There's nothing about having ADHD that makes you want to sit all day long, 6 hours or so, listening to somebody talk, lecture, and tell you what to do. And they don't really care if you want to do it or are excited about it, usually, and it's just not exactly what the system that's in here is designed to respond well to. A neurotypical brain is going to have a much easier time in the average school system and will not probably be quite as drained. So basically, what you get is a kiddo who's trying real hard to not jump up and down, yell and scream, and or just drift off somewhere else, and is really trying. But all that paying attention, all that having to do things you're not really excited about doing, all of that takes a lot of energy. And then, depending on where you are relative to the school, there's the bus ride, and that can be downright exciting. And I can't imagine I can't imagine the kind of person who wants to drive a school bus. That would, that those people are definitely in my short list for sainthood. But anyway, so they get home and they're tired. They probably don't have a lot of energy. Their blood sugar is low. They're probably a little cranky. And depending, I mean, if it's been a really terrible day, whoa, I mean, they can come in a really bad mood. And we had a young man with ADHD, and sometimes him coming in the front door was exciting, I guess we'd say. And, so their first job when they hit the door is to figure out where they're at. You have to get really good at making observations and figuring out, are they in a reasonably good mood? Are they in a terrible, horrible mood and want to yell and scream and jump up and down? Did they have a reasonably good day, or did they have a really terrible day? And but you just have to, you have to use your judgment. And that's, I've done some things about behavioral observation strategies and that sort of thing. And that's really important to do. What you're wanting to do is track their emotions every day. And I think I talked some about that, but, basically assign a number, 0 to 10 is fine, 0 to 5, whatever you want. Just make sure you know which direction you're scoring things in. When they're really angry or really upset, the strong emotions, then that in the way I do things, that's usually a higher number. And when they're just all mellow, that's a lower number. But you can do it however you want, whatever you can remember. But what you're looking for are the patterns. Is it every Wednesday we're coming and we're in a terrible mood, or doesn't matter what day of the week, but is there a pattern? Is there some pattern, especially to the bad days? Because you need to try to figure out what's going on, and catch things early. Okay, so if every Tuesday or every Wednesday, as I said the first time, they're they're really in a lousy mood when they come in the door, what goes on at school on Wednesday? Is are they having PE or an assembly, or did they get picked on at recess? What was going on? Why were they upset? More so than usual. And it'll help you because you can, if you're keeping track of that. And I back in the day, behavior modification was a really strong force in clinical psychology. And basically that had a lot to do with doing behavioral observations and seeing what happened when you did this change the behavior or increase it, decrease it, and so on. It's not important that you know that, except that I've come around to where I think it's a really good set of principles to know about, especially the behavioral observation things, and just being able to observe what effect your behavior has on their behavior. What you say, how's that affect them? It's a an important thing to do. And I mean, I'll freely admit, for most of my parenting was very just reactive. I figure I could handle things when they were unhappy, and I could handle things the other way. But I probably would have done a better job if I'd paid attention more and actually had some, 4 o'clock and a 3. And that's a great score. Boy, we're doing pretty well today. Or if I had a 5 and they're like out of their minds, angry, frustrated, etc. But you have to kind of have a way of telling that, and you can't just trust that you can just look at it and go with it. Because these kids, these are complicated people. These ADHD kids, and and they're in a system that isn't really designed for them, and we know that. If you're the parent that has ADHD, you really know it, and so it's important that you kind of know what you're working with. I mean, because you need a general pattern, a general routine. Like most of the time, we recommend, if you let them not avoid doing the homework right away, you better they better be close by all the time, or you're probably going to have a heck of a time getting them to do the homework. My personal recommendation was to do your homework, get most of it done, and then you can go out and play if we still have time. But some days you're going to be so, you're going to say, whoa, just go for a run, go for a walk, play some soccer, do whatever you will need to do. And don't forget that there are other things you can do that'll help out, for instance, any kind of meditation or that sort of thing, because I also recommend that you start doing that. Behavioral observations, journaling for yourself, and regular daily meditation, usually with some breathing focus work, if you're familiar with that. And that just means most of us don't pay a whole lot of attention to our breathing. I mean, shoot, I was born, the doctor smacked me on the butt. I started crying. That's as much instruction as I had on breathing. But if you can coordinate your breathing with your actions, with what you're doing, you find you're a lot more efficient. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of athletes know that, like weight training, if you're doing any kind of weights, you really need to have your breathing focused. But your breathing also can control your emotions to a large extent. And it can control your young man or young lady as well, or help them control themselves. Okay, the idea is when we are upset, our breathing gets ragged, and we start blowing off more oxygen than we're taking in, and then we're a little bit hypoxic, and that's uncomfortable place to be in. And some people go so far that they start to develop panic attacks. Okay, you don't want to you want your child to know better than that. Okay, and the big deal with you're doing breathing work, breath work, is that your exhalation needs to be slow. That's the one everybody gets into trouble in. Most people, they're real good about inhaling slowly, but then they exhale. And you do that about 3 times, and you're going to be so lightheaded you won't be able to walk straight. So it's the exhalation. Exhale slowly. And ADHDers will do this, and you can make it a little more complicated if that helps them hold their attention. I mean, there's a method they call box 4, and you inhale for 4, you hold it for 4, you exhale it for 4, you stay empty for 4, you inhale. I get so messed up with the counting that it's not very relaxing. Then my brain takes over. What the hell I'm doing? Anyway, so meditation. So you've got exercise to help them calm down. You've got meditation to help them stay in a calm mode. Next thing you want to know, they're probably going to want a snack of some kind. You're going to want to emphasize protein, okay? Protein will help you calm down more, okay? You definitely don't want them eating a Pop-Tart or something like that, because you feed them full of sugar. Well, good luck. You're going to have a really rough evening. Proteins, stuff like beef jerky, Little boys love beef jerky. They feel like they're king of the pioneers or something, but that is a really good snack, and it's relatively high protein. I personally don't like the stuff, but I have a son who really loves it. And so the next thing is actually, where do we do the homework? Okay, it is important that you have a place that's you can still supervise, but it's got a little bit of privacy. We used to have a house that had a desk in the kitchen. That was perfect. It was, a little bit out of the way in the kitchen. So my wife could, do whatever she needed to do. And he could still sit there and do his homework. Sending them to Oh, I got a question. My goodness, I'm a little slow picking that up. Protein, yes, ma'am, protein. It is a little slower to digest, and it tends to calm things down. You know how you feel after you've had a big steak, which is different than the way you feel after you've had a big sugary dessert. I mean, the carbohydrates, you break them down. There's simple carbohydrates like, any sugar, candy, that kind of stuff. And then there's more complex carbohydrates, and that's usually your fruits and veggies and stuff. They're still carbohydrates, but they take longer to digest, and they don't jack you up. You don't get all You want to get jacked up, get yourself a bag of Hershey Kisses and see how many you can eat. It's uh, versus when you have, a chicken breast or uh, and well, any meat is pretty high in protein, and well, it's definitely high in protein. And there are other things that are relatively high in protein, but I'm not a dietitian, so I'm only going to go so far with this whole line of discussion. Anyway, so now we're talking homework spot, someplace where they can do their homework. And then one of the things that ADHDers do is they kind of awfulize. They've got this much homework in math and this much homework in English and this much homework in something else, and they got it all together. And but if you can get them to break it down into component parts, little pieces, and there's a thing called the Pomodoro effect, Pomodoro, and basically it comes because it means tomato, I'm told, in Italian, and it comes from the fact that the guy who developed it used a kitchen timer that was shaped like a tomato. That part is not important, but the part that is important is that its idea you break things down into the component, or not components, but smaller parts. Okay, you know, if your ADHD sits down thinking, I gotta sit here and work until I get all my homework done. Oh my God, I'm gonna die. No, if you have them sit down and you have a little timer. They make a thing called a time timer. You can get it on any of the ADHD supply places, and they're real cheap. 20 bucks, I think, something like that. But anyway, you just set the timer. And of course, most of you have an egg timer in your kitchen anyway, but you just set the timer and you start out, depending on what grade your child is in, you increase it some, but most of the time you're not doing more than like 45 minutes at a whack, and you build up to that. But if you do like 10 minutes at first, when they're first grade, and then you do it. Yes, there are lots of first graders who have homework. I do not understand that, but there are. I'm not sure what they're thinking when they do this. But anyway, so ADHDers, when you give them a goal that they could see, and it's not so far in the distance that they can't quite reach it, they do much better than when it's, oh my God, I got 4 hours of homework. I'm never gonna. Anyway, so you set the timer for. I'd start with, say, 10 minutes for a first grader, maybe 20 minutes for a second grader, kind of thing. But I mean, eventually you want them to be able to work at least 30 minutes. But then sometimes they keep it at 30 minutes. 30 minutes, you take a short break. 30 minutes. Sorry, I have a question. Okay, we'll get that in a second. The deal with um, the Pomodoro effect is you want to have them do enough that they can see the end of it, but also enough that they're going to get it done in a reasonable amount of time, and that's always a little tricky. But you play with it a little bit, experiment a little bit with it until you get the exact best time. 30 minutes is pretty good, and then you take 5 or 10 minutes. Do some jumping jacks or push-ups, or have a glass of water, or whatever is most needed. So you will eventually, be able to get through the homework, and it'll be much less of a problem. Um, you're seeing that there's a limit to it, an end to it, and then they can take a break. So they're basically going from break to break to break instead of to the end of homework till I've got it all done. The next thing, and you've got to make sure of, is that dinner at your house after they finish their homework is not a star chamber proceeding, is not a uh, an issue with everything they did wrong that day, and they're going to get criticized for it, and then there's going to be what's your punishment and that sort of thing. Don't do that. First of all, it's not good for your ADHDer. Second of all, it isn't good for anybody else in the family to have to sit through that. And if you're doing it with everybody else in the family as well, yeah, it's just not a pleasant. You want to keep it pleasant, okay? ADHDers get, well, what do we hear? 70 critical comments every day is on average. So different people, teachers, friends, parents are telling them that what they're doing wrong. And by the time they're age 12, they've gotten 20,000 more critical comments than a neurotypical kid. Okay. And there's, so you don't want to add to that. You want to finish the family interaction with a positive thing, good interaction. Let's talk about what we did today. What did we learn today? Whatever, but you don't, um, you don't use it to punish and criticize. I have a question on medication. Okay, medication is one of these subjects, and good Lord, with the, well, I don't want to, I was going to get political there for a second, but I guess I won't do that. The deal is, okay, we know that stimulant medication works for ADHDers. We know that it is probably the most effective and the fastest acting uh, treatment we have. And matter of fact, there are psychiatrists who say it's the best treatment they've got, period. It's better than any, the antidepressants, anti-anxiety, and for, for the folks who have anxiety and depression. But the stimulant medication works the best. It seems to also change the way your brain metabolizes dopamine to make it a little more like a neurotypical brain. Okay, we know that at ADHD's a lot determined by the metabolism of dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter in your brain. And I know there's a lot of, oh my God, it's horrible, I'm making my kid a drug addict. And, it's not a drug addict, it's a treatment. Okay, it works well for ADHDers, and almost, I mean, I've had patients come back after a week and go, oh my God, I can't believe the difference. And that's great. More power to you. And it works that way most of the time. For other kids, it takes a little more time to get the right dosage, but that's up to your prescribing doc to make sure he sees you regularly enough that he can titrate the dosage. That is, decide how much is enough and how much is not too much. As far as age, I know most of the time we don't think about doing this kind of stuff until kids are 6 or 7, but some kiddos have, especially the supremely hyperactive kids, you need to start earlier. I mean, it doesn't appear to have any long-term negative effects. And we've been doing this for a long time now. And there are some new medications coming out, well, pretty much continuously. But in general, ADHDers who have the proper dosage of stimulant medication do better. Well, and their parents are happier and all that stuff. And, anything, oh my God, he's going to turn into a drug addict. No, he's not going to turn into a drug addict. Matter of fact, I just finished a whole series about ADHD and alcoholism. And what we know is that ADHDers who are on medication are much less likely to abuse other substances. I'm not sure I said that right, but basically, they're much less likely to be drunks or heavy marijuana users or cocaine users or that kind of stuff. So that's, ADHDers have a tendency to go for substances because most of the time it's the people who aren't on any medication treatment are looking for some relief. Being low on dopamine is not real comfortable. Okay, that's uh, the reward substance in your brain that makes you feel good for like oh yeah, I did well. And so anyway, I will close it there. Just remember, we've got behavioral treatments, that's exercise, meditation. We've got um, nutritional interactions, but you won't hear from me a lot on that. But in general, just, protein is emphasized. And I mean, complex carbohydrates are pretty good, but not quite as good. And then behaviorally, how you break out the session, that they have to do, and how the homework is partitioned out. Okay, I will catch you on the next time, and my website is terrygingrassphd.com, and I have a sign-up sheet for my newsletter and my and this show. You can get on my list. You get first dibs on things, and also you can sign up for coaching if you. Okay, coaching is important, and I probably ought to do a couple of sessions on that. It's different from therapy, and it's good for parents. It's good for people of a certain age with ADHD. It's great for executives with ADHD, and I know there are a ton of those people out there. So, first session is a freebie where we just find out if we like each other, and then we can decide if we're going to continue. Okay, I will catch you on the other side, and keep stroking, keep doing it.